Okay, I need like 2 seconds.
Everything is except the
guy behind.
Just 1 sec.
Well, what we can do, they said is put your cast up to here, and we can reevaluate where they.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at Action Utah's 4th annual legislative preview. We're very excited to be here tonight with a strong panel of legislators who are working on a lot of great bills. Action Utah is prioritizing bills from each of these legislators who's here tonight. So we're really excited to have them here to talk about that work and how you can support their bills to help them get past this legislative session. For those of you who are not familiar with us, Action Utah is a nonpartisan community advocacy organization, and our simple goal is helping people get civically engaged so you can have a voice in the issues you care about most. We do that through education, tools and resources, and advocacy opportunities. And of course, our work spans many, many issue areas, the top issues that Utahns care about the most here in our state. We do this work because we strongly, strongly believe, and data shows, that civic engagement truly matters. We just had an op-ed in the Deseret News today about this very subject, about how important it really is for community members to get involved, particularly during the state legislative session. And throughout the year, I can speak loudly here, and throughout the year, so that you can weigh in on these major issues that are coming up throughout the session, and then of course between sessions during the interim time. But civic engagement, data shows, truly does improve communities, it does strengthen our democracy, and it has these added benefits in communities that have a lot of civic participation. They have lower unemployment rates, they have stronger schools, better physical health, and more responsive governments. So if there's ever a reason to get civically engaged, all of these are reasons. And as we say at Action Utah, every action counts. So thank you for being here tonight to learn about how you can get engaged at the state legislative session. I'm not going to get into this very deeply because we have a lot of events coming up. In fact, I'll give you the list here, to help community members learn the skills that they need to be participatory members of the legislative session. Starting with a state capitol tour and a workshop on how to attend and participate in a committee hearing next week. On February 4th, we'll have a simple community advocacy training to teach you how to participate from the Hill or at home during the legislative session. And then we offer weekly lobby days throughout the session so people can come up with us. We can show you how to advocate on whatever issue matters to you and give you the opportunity to speak with these legislators face-to-face at the Capitol. And finally, I want to let you know about our newest event. It's a Bridge Builder Breakfast coming up on April 2nd, where we'll be celebrating some of the community leaders, elected officials, and even students who have made an exerted effort to reach out to multiple stakeholders in an effort to bridge build towards finding good solutions to address our public problems. So we invite you to attend that. As well as to look at our website to find free resources and tools to help you with your advocacy throughout the legislative session and the rest of the year. So without further ado, I really want to just dive into what these legislators are working on and hear from them about these bills and what you can do to support them. Representative Ward, since you have an early departure, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us some of the bills that are priorities for you that you're working on now?
Yeah, thank you so much. So a bill that I've been working on the whole off session, a lot of months now already, will be a change to Utah's clean energy standard. So in Utah, we have a law on the books. It's 12 years old. It was back in 2008, and it sets us a goal that says by the year 2025, it says if it's cost effective, we want to be to 20% renewable energy by the year 2025. So it sets this goal, but it puts it inside the box of saying it still has to be cost effective. We do want to be there, but we're not going to spend extra money to get there. That's just the way the law is framed. But a lot has happened since 2008. We have cheaper renewable energy resources. Rocky Mountain Power has kind of refined their plans looking into the future. And the law as it passed, I felt like was very, very complicated and had some definitions in it that didn't even make mathematical sense. So it seemed to me like it was time for an update. and a simplification, and to look a little further into the future. So my bill will kind of keep the same box of saying if it's cost effective, our state goal is by the year 2030 to be to at least 50% renewable energy by Rocky Mountain Power. And some people will say, well, that's crazy. That's too impossible of a place for them to get to. But when you look at the way we have things defined in the bill to really count all renewable energy and not only some of it, and when you look at Rocky Mountain Power's own plans for where they say they think they're going to be to, it's in that ballpark. So this is kind of a parallel track to the various individual municipalities that have been moving towards clean energy. But I think it's important for the state overall also to say where we hope to be to with our renewable energy. Another bill that I'll be working on, I'm calling it my Keeping Kids Covered bill. On paper, if you look at what we have for children's health insurance, on paper, we have a plan that every single child should have health insurance. We've got Medicaid, we've got CHIP, we've got a subsidized market, we've got the private market. There should be a plan in place for all children. But in the real world, because our bureaucracy is difficult to manage, it doesn't work out that well. So comparing us to other states, we're 41st if you measure how many kids we have that don't have insurance. We don't stack up really well. And there's several reasons for that, a bunch of different things that we could do to change that and make that turn out better, because I think everybody agrees that our intention is that children have health insurance so they can get the care they need. So this other bill will have several small parts. It will switch to 12-month continuous eligibility for kids. It will get better notification to parents of extra documents they have to turn in ahead of time so they don't fall off accidentally, help people manage the transition between Medicaid and CHIP better, just give a few extra tools so that our Medicaid providers are better allowed to contact families and let them know what documents they have to turn in. I think that'll be a good step in the right direction. And then I have one other bill for Title X funding here in the state. Title X funding is federal funding that comes back to the states to help low-income women get contraception. And we have been getting that money for many years, but this year we lost that money. That money had previously been given to Planned Parenthood, but the Trump administration made a change in their rules, whereas the previous long-time rule was you can only have the money if you don't do abortions. The Trump administration changed the rule to say you cannot have the money if you ever even refer anybody to get an abortion. And so Planned Parenthood said, well, then I guess we won't be getting the money. And that money could still go to another provider in the state that isn't Planned Parenthood to get those services to those women. But the federal rules say one little thing. They say if you take this money, you have to be willing to provide contraception to a teenager if she asks you, even if her parents aren't there. And right now we have a law that I think is an old out-of-date law that equates contraception with abortion and says, just like for abortion, a minor can't have that without their parents' consent. The law says state employees can't give contraception to minors without their parents' consent. And so to me, we just need to, to me those two things are not the same, so we need to separate that out and be willing to help minors when they need that. If they're in a tough fix, for most minors, do welcome their parents' involvement, but when they don't, there's usually a good reason for it. And so if we could get that changed, then that money could come back to the state to provide those services. And I'd be happy for help on any of those bills at any point.
So why don't you let some community members know exactly what are the things that they can do to help you with those bills during the session or even starting today?
So I think with all those bills, in order to be helpful, you need to know where the bill is in the process. You need to know when is it been sent to a committee, so it's going to be coming up in that committee soon, or has it made it to the Rules Committee where it's going to be going to a committee soon. And as soon as we know that it's going to be going to a committee within a week or two, then is a great time and is a very important time to contact your own representative. But also, you don't have to stick with your own representative. It's not really helpful to blast every single member of the legislature, those will just get deleted. But if a bill is going to a committee where it's going to be heard, then, and you care about it, then you can and ought to, and it's valid to email the members of that committee and say, I care about this bill, I hope you will support it. And that is not always easy to do on your own, and that is why it is really important to be plugged into groups like Action Utah, or whatever other group you want to belong to that is helping you keep track of the bills you care about, so that they can let you know and say, hey, that bill you care about, it's going to be up, and then you know that that's the week to email or text the members of the committee or their intern or however you're going to contact them to let them know that you want a certain outcome.
Yep. Yes, because Representative Ward does need to leave early, I'm going to stop here and allow the audience to ask him some questions before he has to vote on the bills he presented. So, did you have one in the back?
Those all sound awesome. Thank you.
That's a good question. I like that's kind of hard to comment.
Do any of them have numbers yet?
They don't, and it's been very hard getting those numbers. The renewable energy bill got delayed, but turned in today for a number. It should have a number out within 2 or 3 days, but that is also why, a group like Action Utah, or again, whatever group you want to work with, can help you know when it gets a number, it comes out.
Yes.
The renewable energy bill is very encouraging, but I'm still concerned about that if cost-effective clause. Will there be research done in terms of the externalized costs that are being offset by moving toward that in terms of assessing the cost?
So interestingly, we already have a structure in place in the state that is really, really thorough, and it is the structure that Rocky Mountain Power has to go through for any new power that they say that they need to put in place. And the instruction to them is that it has to be the most cost effective. Admittedly, that can be judged many ways, because it's like, well, is it replacing energy you already have? And what if this is a project that looks like lower cost but higher risk? But they do a very thorough and grown up and complete job of trying to estimate that, and so my bill won't change that process.
But they don't look at the externalized costs of healthcare costs and other economic factors. That's not included in the Public Service Commission's rates.
Correct, that is not.
So
And
how do we get all the costs put on the table?
those externalized costs, I would say, are really difficult to calculate an actual number to. Admittedly, there's easy ways you can think of that you can structure the bill to push harder than the bill that I'm putting through. But honestly, I don't think a bill that pushed harder than my bill would have a chance to get through until there was a broader agreement among the legislature about some of the damage that can come. Climate change in particular, the damage from climate change is global damage, not local damage, right? So locally for air quality, we can measure some things that hurt us here locally. It's just much, much harder to try and put a number on something that happens globally.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Representative Ward? Yes.
Would that bill with renewable energy specifically target Rocky Mountain, or would it apply to other power companies?
My bill actually specifically applies to Rocky Mountain. So Rocky Mountain provides, 70-75% of the power in the state. And then the next biggest fish is UAMPS, which is a group of individual city municipalities. But you can't really target UAMPS as a whole, because it really is just individual cities who agree that they're going to kind of sort of hang out a little bit together. And to me, it gets a little bit tough to go to a single city that they have very different kinds of power in their portfolio right now and say, you, Bountiful City, have to be to this place by a certain date. So my bill really does only just look at Rocky Mountain.
Okay, thank you. Representative Ward, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay, we're going to move a little quicker now through each legislator to offer you each a chance to talk about the bills that we came here to talk about today. And then I have a couple of questions for you, and then at the end I'm going to reserve the time for the audience to ask more questions of the legislators. So, who would like to go first? Oh, we've got two. Okay, I'm going to give it to, you need to go. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Representative Brad Daw from Orem. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here tonight. This is always fun to get here and talk about legislation that's important, I think, not only to me, but to hopefully everybody here. I have to apologize for not wearing a tie, but frankly, this is one of the last legislative meetings for the next month and a half where I can get away with not wearing a tie. I work at Adobe, and this is as dressed up as I get. I hope it's okay. So, and I want to express appreciation. He left Representative Ward. He's very effective at healthcare policy, and it's always a pleasure to see what he's working on. Now, what I'm working on today that I'm bringing to this group has to do with payday lending. Many of you may know and love payday lenders as much as I do. And we have to kind of work very carefully to get something passed because they are very effective at protecting their interests. And so I began the journey with this bill the same way I did last time I was successful with the bill, and that is that we got the auditor to take a look at what's going on in the payday lending industry. And surprise, surprise, we found out there's a lot of people who are getting buried in debt, and payday lenders are perfectly happy to, instead of trying to work with them to get them out of debt, keep them buried and keep their money coming in far in excess of what it should be based on the loan that they got. And so this time around, we have a few items that may seem like small, but this again is what we can pass, but also it's very effective because we're closing a couple of loopholes that payday lenders have taken advantage of. And we're also getting rid of a really goofy law that got enacted a few years ago when I was not in the legislature that allows lenders and small dollar lenders to arrest people if they don't pay up on their payday loan. So we don't think that's a good idea. In fact, the U.S. Constitution has this thing about debtor's prison and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to get away from that concept, and so that's part of it. And the other part is basically forcing the regulator, who's had some trouble regulating them, to get a lot more information so that it becomes very clear to us if the regulator's not doing their job. And our hope is that by doing that, the regulator will start doing their job much more effectively. So again, it may seem like a small step, but from my perspective, this one could be a real game changer. And so what you can do to help me is, you see Representative Hall up here, just kind of kindly put your arm around him and encourage him to enthusiastically move it out of committee.
Instead of this,
I want to hear him when he says, I don't see, the normal motion is I move that we recommend this bill with a favorable recommendation. I'm hoping that he'll say, is I enthusiastically recommend this bill with a favorable, with an
extremely favorable
Hold on, I'm gonna
recommendation.
record that.
So. Anyway, so frankly, talk to members of the Business and Labor Committee, talk to your legislators. This is by no means a heavy-handed bill. And frankly, the better information we get on what payday lenders are doing, the harder it's going to be for them to continue to hold people in debt, and the more we can regulate them effectively. So that's what I'm working on. Short, sweet, simple, but I've always been very appreciative of action. They've been very effective at helping do research and helping to inform my colleagues of what's going on. So with that, I'd be happy. If it's okay, I do need to sneak out of here. I've got to go all the way back to Orem. And if I could take my questions now, would that be okay? So any questions you have for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Yes.
I'm just curious, what compels you to go into this area?
You know, I'll tell you exactly what happened. This was years ago. I had, it's actually not what you think, Representative, but it led to that, and I'll talk about that too. But years ago, I had some delegates, and they were fairly well off. But they had a son who was constantly being harangued by payday lenders because he had a gambling problem, and after listening to him, it became clear to me we should do something here. So I ran what I thought was a perfectly reasonable bill, creating a database, which has been done in other states, by the way, and very effectively. And you would have thought that I dropped an atomic bomb at the Capitol when I did that. They went ballistic. And so that was in 2011, I ran that bill. And then they were so wound up about it. I mean, I thought, well, this is crazy, I'm getting hammered here. But they were so adamant about it that, you know what, something's going on here, I'm going to try it again. So I ran it again in 2012. In 2012, I'll never forget the last couple days of the session, every single legislator up there got a postcard at their home address. Basically, do you remember that, Representative Poulson?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they got a postcard at their home address, and all of the delegates in my district, basically it was a smear piece against me. Now, it had nothing to do with payday lending. It was about how I supported Obamacare, which, by the way, isn't really true, but, you know, who says postcards have to be honest, right? And anyway, so 2012, the payday lending industry set up a corporation to hide the money and to launch a very massive smear campaign against me, which was successful. In 2012, I was ousted from office. But the information all came out. I was back in 2014, and frankly, I decided, well, maybe if they're willing to do that, there must be something they're trying to hide. Let's go have a look. So that's where it started. It's been a fascinating adventure. But thank you, great question. Always glad to recount my tales of woe and try to elicit sympathy. So I appreciate that.
Other questions?
Just a comment though, the reason every other legislator got that was it was the warning. It was the warning to the rest of them, don't you dare go against us or we'll do this to you. And you know, Representative Dodd is such a great example of fighting those kind of secret interests that would just try to, not based on policy, but based on just smear campaigns that, you know, sometimes we can overcome that.
This, I just want to add, this is a really vocal group because my first session, I co-sponsored a bill that was similar to this, and I got the same threats just as a co-sponsor. So it's interesting.
They very much, I mean, payday lenders have two things going for them. They have a lot of money and absolutely no ethics. So it's a very effective combination for political success, in case you're wondering.
Other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Well, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for being here. And don't take me slipping out as I just, it's a bit of a drive home, so I do appreciate I'm sorry, do you have a question? Or? Oh, yes, please.
We just attended a briefing on payday loan providers. So some of the numbers that I heard, I'm sure the audience will appreciate, is that we have more payday lenders in Utah if you combine all the Burger Kings and McDonald's, etc. All of them combined, the payday loan lenders are even higher than that number. Then also the arrests and detention that happens, it constitutes 75% of the cases at the small claim.
How much was
Well, they don't get arrested, but most of the cases, small claims are payday lending cases. Right. And I will say this, last time, I haven't done this for a while, but I drive down, you know, Orem's not a very big town. I drive down State Street from one end to the other. It's about maybe a 4 or 5 mile stretch. And I counted 16 lenders last time I did it in Orem.
My question really is that, yes, you've suffered and you know, why are you just hoping again? Why not go all out? And the question is, the interest rate is at around 620%. And there are about 14 states who have already capped their interest rates and also have put up legislation to understand why should we be funding small claim pools if they're only processing these kind of cases. So my question to you is, you said you would like have it.
It's a great question, and the answer is actually very simple. I like to have success, and I know my colleagues in the legislature well enough, and I won't give details, but this is what I can pass, and the more I can begin to shine the light on them, the more effective it's going to be. So listen, legislation almost always is, the winner is the guy who stays in for the long game. And so I keep going, I keep working, we keep shining the light, we keep getting more information, more data, and frankly, I'm beginning to see a sea change already. So it's not there yet, but this is what I can succeed with, and this is what I can pass now. And you know, more is better. I mean, frankly, if more effective legislation passes, I'll support that. And if I think I've got the ability to, you know, to pass something stronger, I certainly would. So I mean, my idea would be to pass a database bit like what they do in Florida. But there are, without naming names, there are some fairly significant roadblocks to doing something like that. But this, I believe I can get around. So that, it's just pragmatism. So I do appreciate that. You're right. It's not enough, but it is what I can get done.
Okay. Representative Dodd, thank you so much for being here. Safe ride home. Okay, so Representative Spendlove raised his hand next. I'm going to start with him and then we can return to you, okay? So Representative Robert Spendlove from Sandy.
Thanks so much, and also I want to thank Action Utah for doing this and kind of hosting this. So my bill is essentially building on what Representative Ward's bill is doing. So his is kind of a holistic approach to addressing air quality and climate change, and mine is saying, how do we accomplish those objectives? One of the, and I've got two of them. I think Carrie only approved one, but I'm not mentioning two, but I'll go fast.
Let's see what it is.
Okay, yeah, we'll see. You guys can decide whether it's any good. So the first one, one of the number one ways we can improve the environment, clean up the air, is by changing our transportation. We've done good things in moving forward on tier 1 fuel, but we really need to be getting to electric vehicles. And I think if we have renewable electricity generation coupled with an electric vehicle, we can make huge impacts. But one of the biggest struggles is they call it range anxiety. It's really easy to drive your car back and forth from Salt Lake to Bountiful or Salt Lake to Sandy. But if you're going anywhere outside of the Wasatch Front, you have to be really careful because you might be stuck without the ability to refuel your car. And there are specifically areas of the state that are kind of black holes. Wendover, you really can't go to Wendover. Now, if you have a Tesla, you're fine, right? Tesla's everywhere. But if you don't want to spend $100,000 on an electric car, there aren't a lot of resources. So Wendover's one, Green River's another. If you're trying to go from Bryce Canyon to I-70, it's a long ways, and there's not a lot of resources. And so what I've been doing is working really closely with Utah Department of Transportation to have them, and then on the other side of it, so I'm an economist, and what we're seeing is what we call a market failure. The private sector hasn't stepped up to provide this yet. You can't go to Maverick or to Chevron and refuel your electric vehicle. And so we've got this failure in the market right now. And so what this bill would be to help facilitate the government stepping in and providing that resource until the private sector steps up and starts providing it. And so what it would do is it would kind of set forth an aggressive plan with the Department of Transportation working to develop, they call this, well, I forget the exact name, but essentially what it would be is there would be a charging station every 50 miles throughout the entire state. And working on interstates, working on state highways, really filling in those gaps. And then they would also be kind of working with the private sector, maybe having sponsorship. So you'd go to a charging station and it would say, sponsored by Maverick, sponsored by Chevron, to kind of bring them in, have this, what we call a public-private partnership. A couple of their really interesting ideas, because the big one, just think about trying to go to Wendover. As soon as you pass Grantsville, there's nothing until you hit Wendover, except there is a rest stop. And so what they want to do is they want to put in these charging stations and rest stops. The problem they're running into is federal law prohibits any kind of refueling in rest stops next to freeways. But they allow vending, so you can get a candy bar, but you can't fill your car. So their idea is to essentially say that these are electric vending machines. So instead of vending chips, you're vending electricity, which I think is just great. So that's the one bill. It has a pretty aggressive plan that it would have to have the full network in place by 2025. And then we're thinking we want to even jumpstart a little bit further and get some of those critical areas even within the next couple of years. So that's one of them. The second one is addressing our ski bus network, trying to get cars out of the canyons. So I represent I'm just a little bit south. Marie Poulson actually represents the canyons. I represent the entrance to the canyon. But one of our struggles with the ski buses, we want to get more ridership, we want to get more people there. But if you, next time you're driving up the canyon, pay attention to the ski buses. They do not have ski racks on the outside. It's because they're not allowed to. They are restricted by law from their width. And so what this would do is this would essentially just carve them out and allow them to be able to put those ski racks. I mean, it's a little bill and it's a little change, but it will allow them to free up more space, make the ride more comfortable, and make those ski buses more attractive. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Marie Poulson, why don't you go next?
Well, I'm the one-armed bandit in this group of men. I have very bad luck with ice right before the legislature, and so just a few days ago I broke my wrist, my right hand. So it's going to present an interesting challenge. I'm going to shift subjects a little bit and talk about education, talk about a bill, something I've been working on for several years, actually, that I'm running again this session. I ran a similar bill last year. We didn't get it through the Senate, but got it through the House very easily. And it has to do with the decision a few years ago, 2011, the legislature passed a bill that assigned a letter grade as far as evaluating schools. So a school is an A school or a B school or a D school. And it sounds like a really good idea because it's very simplistic, but from the get-go it caused a lot of problems. It was based mainly on standardized test scores in a few core subjects as far as these schools. Let me just give you an example of how this caused some problems. In my area, there's an elementary school, Midvale Elementary, that serves a community that's very ethnically diverse, but it also serves the family homeless shelter in Midvale. And so I substituted at this school. I substituted one day in second grade, and there were only 4 of my students that spoke English. And I was just in awe of that teacher that worked with that group trying to teach reading with students that didn't speak English in their home. They're just a really good group of hardworking educators, but they consistently get really bad grades because we're not recognizing the great work they're doing with homeless families. You know, these kids are kids that don't eat and are in transition and don't speak English at home, and there's many nationalities. There's refugee children. And imagine you're a teacher in that school just putting out a Herculean effort and not getting recognized for the kind of efforts that they're doing. And one of the problems with this school grading program is I'm an educator myself, and it was just really driving teachers out of the classroom in droves because they were so frustrated with the system and having it focus on such a small thing. A few years ago, working on this, we were able to have a moratorium on the assigning that single letter grade. And they moved to a system called the dashboard system, where if you look up your child's school, you can look in and see a myriad of different indicators. They do recognize the scoring and standardized tests in those core subjects, but you can also see the growth that's happening in that school. You can see the special programs they have, like after-school programs, the programs in the arts. And so this dashboard system gives such a better indication of what is happening at your child's school, and gives you an opportunity to see some of the good things and the things that they need help in. And so a much better system. So what my bill does, and it's just been numbered, it's HB 175, it removes the requirement to have the single letter grade and then it just focuses on this dashboard system, which gives a much more comprehensive look and requires people to look deeper at what is going on in the schools. This is very timely again this year because last year the state of Utah moved to a new testing system called the RISE test from the SAGE tests. They had a lot of difficulties with the test. The vendor didn't do a great job with it, and so what happened is your children would be in the middle of taking those standardized tests and the computer would go out, or it would lose where they were. Everybody was completely frustrated. So it's still in the law now that they have to publish those letter grades, but for this year particularly, the data is completely inaccurate, and so the state school board has begged the legislature, we don't want to punish schools for data that we can't rely on with the RISE test. So I think this is a really good year to run this. I've gotten it through last year, got it through the House very easily. It got stuck in the Senate. I would appreciate your help with that, getting it through. But then the other thing, I think, as an educator myself, this is one of the best to do this, to make this change, to allow educators and allow those working in the schools to highlight some of the great work they're doing. I think this is one of the best non-monetary ways to attract and keep good teachers, because so many of our educators and parents and children have been frustrated with this system. I just wanted to mention one other bill that I didn't approve with you that I am running that's kind of in process, that you can say it has to do with the cost of insulin. And what it's doing is it's going to be a hard push. It's doing something similar to what they did in Colorado, where it caps the copay for insulin to $100. I have a family that works in healthcare, and this is a drug that's been around forever. We're not paying a lot of R&D on it, and so many of the citizens of our state rely on it for their lives. And it's gone up like 300%. It's just an example of drug companies gouging greed, in my view, a lot of greed with people who are sick. And so I've got that in process as well. So just would love to have your support and open to any questions.
I think if you don't mind, I'd like to wait until the end to do questions, so please remember yours, and we'll just continue moving through for now. Why don't we continue down the line and go with Representative Craig Hall from West Valley City.
Hello everyone, my name is Representative Craig Hall. I represent part of West Valley. Again, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you taking interest in what we're going to be starting on Monday. It's unbelievable that it's already starting on Monday. I think this year it actually falls a little bit later in the calendar, but it really sneaks up on us really quick. So the bill that I was asked to come and speak about today is a bill that I've been working on. It's a prohibition of straight party ticket voting. If anyone is not familiar with that issue, it's as you know, and by the way, municipal elections don't have it's not a it's a nonpartisan race, so this doesn't affect elections in odd years when you're voting for your city council and your mayors, but it does affect us every even year, 16, 18, 2020, 22, and so on. So when you get your ballot in those even years, you have all of these races, and usually in even years, the ballot is a little bit longer. So at the very beginning of the ballot, there's it says, would you like to vote for all the candidates in one particular party? Would you like to vote for all Democrats? Would you like to vote for all Republicans? Would you like to vote for all Libertarian? Would you like to vote for all United American? And it lists all of the parties that are officially registered in the state. And you can go ahead and hit your favorite political party and then be done with the voting if that's what you choose. Straight ticket voting is relatively high in Utah, and it is a trend that is losing steam here in the United States. I just looked it up today. Starting in 2020, there will only be 7 states left. Texas was the last one that repealed straight ticket voting. So we only have, in 2020, there will only be 7 states. Hopefully in 2020 there will only be 6, because hopefully we can get this bill passed in 2020 and not have it as an option in November of 2020. Again, there are only 43 states that there are 43 states that have already decided that straight ticket voting is not a good idea, and in all of those 43 states, one party rules, right? It's either Democrat or Republican. Texas, for example, is a very Republican state, but they also decided that despite the fact that they have a lot of Republicans in the state, they believed that it was a good idea to get rid of straight ticket voting. I personally believe that it leads to a more educated voter. If the voter is forced to go down race by race and look at the 2 names that are on the ballot and decide who is the better candidate, because in the end, the individual that pushes the button is the candidate. It's not a political party, it's the candidate that votes yes or no on certain bills. And I will say that not all Democrats are the same. Not all Republicans are the same. And this bill, of course, it wouldn't take, there's a designation after each candidate's name. It says, you know, candidate's name, and then it has whether they're Republican. Then it has candidate's name, and then it lists them as a Democrat. So nothing prohibits a voter from voting for all Democrats or all Republicans or all Libertarians. It just forces the individual to go step by step. One of the problems that we have found with straight party ticket voting is that sometimes when somebody hits the Republican button or the Democrat button, they fold up their ballot and they think that they're done. But they're actually not done. So for example, in 2018, besides political candidates on the ballot, there were propositions, right? Where you vote yes or no. There is a whole list of judges that are standing for retention, where you have to vote yes or no. And again, some individuals believe that when they hit the Republican or the Democrat button that they're done, and they fold up the ballot and they send it back in, and they don't realize that they are not voting in several of the elections that they have. Some have said that, you know what, the ballot is long, let's just make it easy for individuals. Well, I guess my reply to that is, okay, so why don't we have an option to vote yes on all the propositions? It's because we want all the voters to look at each proposition by itself and decide yes or no. Why don't we have a straight yes option for all the judges? Why do we not have a straight no vote option for all of the judges? It's because we want the voter to go and look at every single name and decide, okay, do I want to retain this judge? Do I not want to? And nothing stops the voter from voting no on every single judge if that's what they want to do, or voting yes on every single judge if that's what they want to do, or voting yes on every proposition or no on every proposition. So again, not all Republicans are the same. Not all Democrats are the same. One of my, when this was going down last year, and last year this bill passed overwhelmingly in the House. It got over 2/3. It got like 53, 54 votes, I believe, in the House, and then stalled the very last night in the Senate. So it got further than it ever has. I think we're getting closer. This is the first year that it actually passed the House, and it passed by more than 2/3. So we're cautiously optimistic that we can make it happen this year. I send out a survey every year and to my constituents, and one of the responses I got back, I kind of chuckled at, and his response was, there are idiots in both parties. There are great people in both parties. And so again, I think that if we help the voters become informed, it forces them to decide to look at the two names that are on the ballot for a certain position. If they want to vote for all Republicans, that's fine. If they want to vote for all the Democrats, that's fine. But I just think that overall, and the overwhelming majority of states have agreed that this making individuals go down and make a decision in every race is the right way to go. So that's my summary on that.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to, we've got Representative Jeff Stenquist from Draper.
Well, thank you for allowing me to come here tonight. Apologize I came in late. I was speaking at another panel of students in Granite School District about computer science education, since that's my field. The bill that I'm going to talk about today, and actually I have two as well, but I'll keep it short. I'm running a bill that would, it's an both of these bills are air quality bills that I want to talk about. And the first one, so we know that right now in the state of Utah, a large portion of our air emissions are coming from vehicles. That number actually is going down every year because we're driving cleaner vehicles, and now that Tier 3 fuels are now just coming online. That trend is going to continue. But right now, vehicles account for about 42% of our air emissions. But something that I didn't realize until I started getting into this issue was that of those vehicles, about 60% of those vehicle emissions are coming from old polluting cars. A lot of those are Tier 0 fuel vehicle cars. Those would be 2003 and older. Oftentimes, one of these older polluting vehicles would be the equivalent of 60 newer, cleaner cars on the road. So what my bill would do essentially is provide a cash incentive for anyone that is that's owning and driving an older Tier 0 or Tier 1 fuel vehicle that is also failing emissions, so the dirtiest of the dirty cars, in one of the non-attainment areas, that's Salt Lake County, Utah County, and so forth. People could apply for a cash incentive to buy a newer, cleaner vehicle. And there's actually kind of a scale, depending on how old your vehicle is that you're turning in and how new the vehicle is that you're buying, you could get an incentive up to about $5,000 per vehicle. Now there are requirements that the vehicle would have to be destroyed, because the goal of the bill would be to get these vehicles off the road, so the engine components, some of the emissions components would have to be destroyed, it would have to be scrapped. And it's a complicated program because it involves car dealers that have to be on board to administer the program. Health departments actually coordinate it, as well as vehicle recyclers. So, and there's a lot of parameters that people have to fall within. So there's a lot of moving parts. I worked with Action Utah last year. They were super helpful. We put this bill together, but it was we were already in the midst of the session. And but the bill did get through the House, got through Senate committee, but then we just kind of ran out of money, appropriations money for it. So even though last year the state of Utah allocated a record $29 million for air quality, which is fantastic. And that's something I think that we need to point out is that I've spoken a lot about clean air, and one of the things that I mentioned is that our air is cleaner than it has ever been. And when I say that, people are shocked. What do you mean? Our air is getting dirtier. No, actually our air is getting cleaner every year. But the reason why is because there's been efforts made in the past to make improvements. And so we're making good progress, but we just need to continue these efforts because as the watch list front continues to grow, we need to continue to stay ahead of that curve. Soon, we expect that vehicle emissions will start to drop lower and will no longer be the #1 source of emissions in the valley. And the #1 source of emissions will become what's called area sources, which is basically our homes and buildings and businesses. So the second bill that I have actually It's fairly simple, but it would allow, right now there's a program with, when you pay your electrical bill, there's an incentive program that allows you to use certain, basically when you go buy an Energy Star appliance, there's like tax rebates and tax incentives you can use to buy those kind of vehicles, but they only apply to like a certain type of like electrical appliance. There's newer, more energy efficient types of appliances that are coming online that are like a hybrid electric gas, water heaters and things like that. And this would just broaden that incentive so that you could use it for some of these newer type energy efficient appliances. So kind of going toward that area source issue as well. So that's it.
Thank you so much. Okay, we are waiting on Representative Harrison, who's also coming from another event. While we wait for her, we have one person at the table who is not a legislator. This is Carrie Butler, the Policy Director at Action Utah, and she's here to speak about two of our priority bills that legislators were not able to come in person to talk about. So, Carrie, why don't you go ahead?
Yes, hi. I'm here representing Representative Handy on this one bill. It's the Extreme Risk Protection Order, Protective Order. This is a bill that we've been working on at Action with the representative for, this will be our third year working on this, and we feel like it's very, very important to pass this year as a suicide prevention tool in the toolbox. This bill would allow for family members or law enforcement to file a petition to temporarily separate a person who's in crisis from their firearms. We know that when somebody has access to lethal means and they're in crisis, their risk of dying by suicide goes up significantly. And we think this is a way that we can reduce that risk quite a bit while still maintaining Second Amendment rights and still maintaining a person's civil rights and access to their homes and their families. In states that have passed this bill, for example, Connecticut and Indiana, they've had this on the books for 20 years. They have they've done studies and found that their suicide rate or their firearm suicide rate has dropped anywhere between 7 and 13%. Now, if you take our numbers and apply that reduced rate to our suicide numbers, our firearm-specific suicide numbers in the state, we're talking about 30 or so lives every year. So we think it's really important. I think it's a very divisive bill because it contains the word firearms. And we know that firearms are really important to us in the state of Utah. We know that firearms are part of the fabric of our society, and we think this is a really good compromise to enable us to give some tools in the toolbox while maintaining our rights. So that's one. And then the other one that we are working on is with, there will be a couple, one from Representative Brian King and one from Representative Christine Watkins. Neither were able to attend tonight, but these are mental health parity bills. In 2008, the federal government passed the mental health parity laws, which require that insurance providers cover mental health in the same way that they cover physical health. So if you have a broken leg, you can go to the hospital and that is covered by your insurance. If you have anxiety or a panic attack, you can go see a therapist, and that should also be covered by insurance. That's a federal law, but there have been certain carve-outs for different insurance providers. For example, if you are a self-insured provider, such as the Public Employees Health Program that we have in the state, and a few other ones, then you get to opt out of that parity law. What these bills do is attempt to create more opportunities for those insurance providers to cover mental health and behavioral health. In addition to that, we have seen this happening across the state. We have networks that are inadequate. I don't know if you've ever tried to get into a mental health provider. The waiting lists are long. If you are insured, you might have a list of 40 providers, and you might be able to call every single one of those, and nobody has any room for you. That was my personal experience. This is kind of near and dear to my heart. It took me 3 months to get to see a mental health provider when I needed one. So this bill that Representative King will be running will require a little bit better oversight so that the networks that the insurance providers are giving to their customers or to their consumers are a little bit broader, so that there's a little bit more room and people can get it quicker. I think it's really important, especially in a state that has just released a report. We have a very limited supply of mental health availability.
Okay, we've covered a lot of bills here tonight, a lot of material, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions. So let's take some time to get questions from the audience. Yes.
I've got so many questions. But, a quick comment before I get to the question, which is thank you, Representative Paul, for sponsoring the bill to make a difference for civic engagement. Since it underlies and undermines everything for civic engagement, it's really important, and I think all legislators have better ideas of how to get civically involved. But my question is kind of about air emissions and clean vehicle incentives, which a couple of the panelists spoke to. Of course, it's ridiculous, I think, that there is a penalty assessed to clean air vehicles, such as electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and even hybrids. You know, I can see a little bit of the justification for plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles because they're not paying fuel tax for what they're using from electricity. But of course, hybrid cars, every mile they drive is fueled by gasoline, which they pay fuel taxes are, basically disincentivizing efficiency. So, as a matter of fact, a lot of non-hybrid cars, of course, get better fuel economy than a lot of hybrid cars. So I'm wondering if any of you individual legislators will look to remove that extra fee on hybrid cars, or to get parity, or you're going to maybe look at taxing and disincentivizing more efficient cars that aren't hybrid as well. Does that make sense?
I'm not going to take that one. That's all right. Yeah, what you've described it very well. That there's kind of this tension between incentivizing cleaner vehicles for air quality and emissions, but also the need to fund transportation, which is a big problem. So my prediction on that is that I don't think that we're going to get to a place where we can simply. Let me back up a little bit. You know, I think it made sense early on, and oftentimes this happens when the government will step in and try and maybe kind of give a boost to a new technology or a new innovation to kind of get it going until the private market can take over. And I think that the thinking from the legislature has been, okay, we've given these incentives to try and get the private market off the ground, but now we're to the point where there is a robust market out there and manufacturers are selling electric vehicles, so it's not necessary from an innovation standpoint, and we need transportation funds, so and I think that happened. I can take a pass because I can say, well, I wasn't here, and pass the buck that way. But so I think now we're to a point where the question is, well, should we be incentivizing these vehicles because of emissions? I think that ultimately what's going to happen is I don't think we're going to be able to remove the fee that electric vehicles are currently paying until we can replace it with something else. So
the hybrids specifically, which are paying fuel taxes, we are just taxing efficiency.
Right, and so I think really the idea is that you know, helping or requiring hybrid or people that are paying less in fuel to still contribute to the transportation fund, and that's part of the challenge is that the gas tax is a dying tax. That is not a sustainable model for us to continue to fund roads via the gas tax. So we have to replace that with something else, a vehicle miles traveled type fee. And I think once that we replace that, I think that then we could potentially look at maybe a graduated scale, you know, based on the type of vehicle that you drive, perhaps. But I don't know that I necessarily expect that to happen anytime soon.
Can I add to that? Just when really, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go
I was
for
just
it.
going to say, I think the Department of Transportation is working on a road user charge.
Yeah, there's a
which
new
would
pilot program
replace
that just
that.
started that, yeah. So to start moving in that direction,
Yeah,
for sure.
so that yes, we can know, so it doesn't appear that we're penalizing cars that are cleaner and more efficient, but at the same time capturing the user, or we're charging for the use of the road, so.
So I'd like to go a step further, which is, if you think about it, who has the biggest impact on the roads? It's not the Prius, it's the semi. And so what we need to have is we need to have a road use, or what is it, truck, or I don't know. I have always called it VMT, vehicle miles traveled. So you charge it by miles driven and by the weight of the car. And that's going to benefit, it's going to encourage people to be driving more fuel efficient vehicles. If you want to drive a monster truck, great, you're going to pay the cost on the roads for that.
I would support that bill.
They would encourage you to be a little skinnier.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to welcome you, Representative Harrison. Thank you for coming tonight. We just went through and talked about the bills that each of these individuals was working on. So why don't we take a moment break from the questions and have you present the bills that you came here to speak about tonight.
Was there one in particular you wanted me to talk about?
Let's see, we
Carrie's
wanted to
nodding
talk-
her head.
Yes, we wanted to talk about childcare.
Perfect.
And there was one other. Childcare and childcare.
Perfect. I got two of those. So, my name is Suzanne Harrison. I am a state house representative from Sandy, and I represent a little bit of Sandy, a little bit of Draper, and a little bit of White City. But the biggest chunk is Sandy, and the best people in the world live there. No offense to any of you, but thank you to Action Utah for hosting this. Thank you to all of you for coming, and a special shout out to my daughter Aline for joining me on Democracy in Action Night. Thank you for my colleagues. This is a lot of fun. So in my day job, I'm a mom and a medical doctor, and then was recently elected in 2018 to the state house. I have really enjoyed it. It's been a great experience. I have two bills that I'm working on regarding childcare, and really the whole idea came from a constituent down in my district. And there is a critical shortage of childcare in this state. If any of you have ever tried to find a spot at a licensed childcare provider, it is difficult. The lines are long, and for every one spot that is even in existence, there are 4 or more kids that need care. And I think too often we stick our heads in the sand and pretend that perhaps people aren't working outside the home in the state. Well, they are, and I think we should value childcare in all of its forms, whether it's paid or unpaid. It's some of the most important work there is on this planet, and whether you're caring for young folks or older folks, it's these kinds of caregiving need to be valued and honored. So the two bills I'm running, and I want to give a shout out to Angie Cook up there, who is helping with this. She's with the Utah Child Care Coalition, and that is a nonprofit working to help businesses connect with licensed child care providers and help increase the number of licensed child care spots in the state, which we desperately need. And that hopefully will also help address some of the costs associated with child care, because this is a very expensive thing, and it's squeezing middle income families the very hardest. So the two bills have to do with, number one, there is a group here, an organization called the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and that is a part of the executive branch. Then they go out and try and work on economic development throughout our state. One thing that they do is work on increasing or attracting or increasing companies with good jobs here in the state of Utah. The first bill I'm working on allows that organization to consider whether a company has working parent benefits. And by that I mean, do you offer child care on site? Do you subsidize the cost of child care for employees? Do you offer paid family leave? Do you offer flexible work hours? Those types of things. And it allows GOA to consider whether a company has those types of benefits for employees in considering what type of incentive package they would get for either expanding here in Utah or coming to Utah. And I believe that all subsidies should be scrutinized in this state, and we should look very carefully at them. But certainly we should be attracting companies that value and take care of employees, and working parent benefits is critical to that, in my opinion. The other bill has to do with employers. We need our friends in the business community to step up and help address this critical shortage of childcare in Utah. we are last in the nation in access to childcare. And this bill allows employers to apply for a tax credit for subsidizing or providing childcare on site. Either one, help pay for it at a center that's doing it well and is licensed, or provide it on site yourself as an employer and apply for a tax tax credit from the state. There will be a cap on that of up to $500,000 for the state. So it's not like going to break the bank of Utah, but it will hopefully help our business friends start to think, hey, this is a way we can attract and retain talent. This is a way we can help middle-income families especially afford this critical need in our state, and hopefully help increase the numbers of licensed childcare spots in the state of Utah. Thank you for inviting me to talk about this, and to all of you for being engaged in local issues.
So you missed the question just a moment ago about, do you foresee that there may be some shift or change towards, instead of, it sort of said, penalizing electric vehicle owners and hybrid owners with the charges that were assessed on them to try to make up for fuel taxes. Do you foresee any shifts in that coming to help incentivize that industry and to move people towards more clean technologies and vehicles?
Well, I think I'm always in favor of a carrot rather than a stick as a first option. And to be clear, I was not in office when that nearly tripling of the registration fee for electric vehicles was passed. I think that's a problem. We want to be incentivizing people to do the right thing by our air, and we need to be helping people make the right choice. And electric vehicles has to be part of that puzzle. I'm actually running legislation related to this to encourage more people to purchase electric vehicles. It would create a sales tax exemption for people that are going to buy an electric vehicle or a plug-in electric hybrid. And the difference between that and what's been done in the past is, number one, it's at point of sale. It's a sales tax break on the purchase of these vehicles. And secondly, there is a cap on the price for the car or vehicle of about $45,000. I don't think we should be subsidizing folks buying $120,000 Teslas in this state. They're fine. They're fine on their own. But we should be helping average, everyday, regular people be able to afford and think about buying cleaner vehicles. And so that's the bill I'm running. It will also allow for an expansion of an existing tax incentive to allow people to convert fleet vehicles, those larger truck vehicles, convert them to electric vehicles. And if you're not already driving an EV, which you definitely should look into, they're actually very affordable, especially used ones, or taking transit or walking or biking. If you need to drive a car that requires gasoline, we just launched something today. It's a website that will allow you to know where you can buy cleaner burning, lower sulfur gasoline. Check it out. It's tier3gas.org. That's TIER, the number 3gas.org. And it can let you know where you can buy cleaner burning gas. It can help reduce your particulate pollution coming out of your tailpipe by up to 80%. It's a game changer in the state of Utah. It's not a silver bullet. We still need to be addressing CO2 emissions, but this is one tool in our toolbox to clean up our air by reducing particulate pollution out of tailpipes. So check it out and use the power of your wallet to encourage these companies that have stepped up to do the right thing by making this gas. Go buy it.
Thank you. So I just wanted to comment. A number of us have been involved the last few years in what we call the Clean Air Caucus, which is a completely bipartisan effort on this, and where we have worked really hard on bringing in this Tier 3 gasoline. And I also wanted to mention that I was in the legislature, but I didn't support what you're talking about, because as Representative Harrison says, I think we influence behavior a lot better with the carrot than the stick. And I think that's the thing that moves people and makes them change.
Okay, more questions. There's one in the front.
The Utah Nurses Association, of which I'm a member, has joined with the American Operating Room Perioperative Registered Nurses. We have a bill this session that Representative Harrison is a co-sponsor of, and it will require hospitals and surgical centers to have a surgical smoke-free evacuation policy, because 86% of all surgeries have cauterizing of tissue issue, and they've identified over 150 different chemicals in the smoke that is generated and goes right into the lungs of everyone in the operating room, including any patient who's not intubated. And if a woman is having a C-section, she most likely has a cauterizing procedure, and she's breathing that smoke, and her newborn is breathing that smoke, and her partner is breathing that smoke, in addition to everyone in the OR and Representative Harrison is an anesthesiologist. Our sponsor is Kathleen Reedy, and we have Suzanne Harrison, Carol Speckman-Moss, and Jana Ibumoto as co-sponsors. We would love to have some Republicans join us, please. The Utah Medical Association has indicated they're in favor of, but they want to see the writing of the bill. And Hospital Association is unconvinced it's an issue.
We ever invite? It's nice to be invited to do things like that. We don't get invited in.
Love to have you guys.
And I'd just like to say thank you for your excellent work on this. I think this is a great example of people think, change just happens up here. Really, it's people that have a concern that they see in their day-to-day lives. They get educated, they get involved, and then you can actually impact change. And this is a perfect example of that. And thank you for your work on it. I'm honored to be the House sponsor for it.
Thank you. Next.
Question for Representative Stenquist about the old vehicles. Are provisions being made for the scrapping of the old vehicles, like for the fees that are involved with getting rid of the old car?
Yes, that's all in the bill. That the recyclers, some of the money that normally would be remitted back to someone who's normally turning in a vehicle would be remitted back to the health department, so it could go back into the fund. And actually this bill that I'm running, there was a pilot program to do this very thing that was done up in Cache Valley, and it was funded by money from EPA, and the Division of Air Quality applied for an additional grant and was given that. So now they have additional funds to run that program in Salt Lake and Weber, Davis County. So we basically modeled my bill after that federal program, so that for the state of Utah, they're just administering one program, and it's the same parameters. I'm just looking to basically add some additional funding to remove more of those cars off the road.
I have a question for Representative Poulson about the more comprehensive grading system you're having for Utah schools. So in addition to having this more comprehensive grading retain quality educators, in what ways would this come back to benefit some of the economically disadvantaged or English as a second language students? You mentioned that Midvale Elementary. How would this comprehensive grading system benefit some of these more needy students?
Well, that, like I mentioned, one of the problems with the school grading, when it first came out, was I called it a zip code bill, because when as an educator, I knew you could pretty much predict which schools would have the low grades, because although we have great expectations for all of our children, some of those areas where there's a lot of Title I, or there's a great deal of ethnic diversity, or there's a lot of transition, that was, it focused on them and kind of punished them when there are great things going on in the school. The one that I focused on. I think one of the great benefits about having the more comprehensive dashboard is that there are a lot of us as educators that want to work with students that have special needs or special problems. I mean, that it's very invigorating. I've worked with those students, and what the grading system was doing was driving them out of the classroom instead of focusing on our best and brightest to come and work with students with special needs. So I think that's one of the great advantages. And then one of the great advantages to having it more comprehensive too is allow our schools to not focus just on the test scores, but so much of, if you look at your own students, there's a vast array of things that happen at school as far as special programs, the arts, we're in a public high school or a public middle school, what they were focusing on is only about 20% of the subjects, and then not highlighting some of the great programs. You know, the school may have a program in body shop or veterinarian, but what the effect of school grading did was make the schools focus so much on one thing that they got rid of those programs that are so vital and are of such great importance to our students, because the focus was just there. So I think that's another plus about looking at the dashboard instead. And then as parents, we can look at that dashboard and get a better look at what's really happening in our schools. So
it's very, very much funding based, I suppose, of better grades or a better view of it gives a more accurate view of performance in the school.
Right.
Then that can impact state funding for that school, which can still go forward.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's another item too. Thank you.
Okay, got one in the way back.
So I have a comment and a question, but I will fully disclose that I'm also the board chair and co-founder of Action Utah, so I support everything that is on the table right now. But my brief comment is in another realm of my life, wearing my other hat as a mental health professional here in Salt Lake City, and I've been serving clients for about 15 years, and so the mental health parity and the extreme risk protections really resonate with me in that aspect of my life. And I will say that it is probably, gosh, I would say 4 to 5 times a year that I get a phone call from a family member desperate to get support for maybe it's a combat veteran, it could be a brother or sister or son or daughter that is struggling with substance abuse and in a desperate and dire situation where suicide is a very real possibility. There's access to firearms, and there's not the capacity of that family member to make a decision, an affirmative, positive, sound-minded decision for themselves. I have nothing to tell these family members currently, and the boards of many colleagues in other states where Europe is passed, and where they have that tool to offer families. I will tell you that I am convinced that it would be life-saving if we can pass that here in these states. My question also is related to this bill, and I probably know the answer, but I would love to hear this described a little bit, because there seems to be a very significant application for life-saving in situations where domestic violence or concerns around domestic violence may be really a very real possibility. I know that's a significant issue here in Utah, with the University of Utah, with the surrounding community. So I'm wondering if you could just briefly note how the ERPO may be able to be significant for those situations.
That's a really good question, actually. We've been fortunate enough to work together with the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition in the development of this bill as well. It might come as a shock to you. It came as a shock to me to note that we don't have a relinquishment process in Utah for firearms. So if you're convicted of domestic violence behavior, I don't know how to refer to it. I'm not great at the linguistics, but if you're convicted of domestic violence offense, you are a prohibited person. So that means that you're not allowed to own a firearm. Now, there's 2 things that could happen that don't happen. Number one, there's nobody coming to take the firearm. You're not allowed to have one. So you can give it to your brother, you can bury it in the backyard. You're not supposed to have it. But there's nobody coming to make sure that you don't have it. And number 2, oftentimes people are not aware that they're prohibited persons. That's not something that's disclosed at the time of jurisdiction. So ERPO could be a really valuable tool in the relinquishment process particularly for a partner who's experiencing domestic violence and is maybe afraid or has been threatened with that particular firearm, for them to get some help and have law enforcement and the weight of the black robe effect, the weight of a judge, and an order to separate that person from their firearm when they're in crisis or when they're behaving dangerously or when they are increasing their use of substance abuse. They're increasing their use of substances. So, and the other thing about that, Katie, is that we know, and you know this too, that we have out of all of the homicides in Utah, 40% of them are domestic violence homicides, which is kind of higher than the national average. And a majority of those are perpetrated with a firearm. So, and a majority of those, the ones that are perpetrated with a firearm, the perpetrator was suicidal before they were homicidal. So we know that if we can intervene a little bit earlier, if we can separate that person from their firearm, we can prevent both the suicide and the homicide. So we know that this is a really powerful tool that can apply not just to suicides, but to domestic violence situations as well. Thanks for that great question.
I am very sorry, we are at the end of our time, but I hope those of you who still have questions will approach the legislators here at the end and ask them, or at least email them with your additional questions. I just want to let you know that there are a few things you can do immediately coming out tonight. Make sure you know who does represent you going into the panelists for being here. We really appreciate your time at this very busy time of year, but always, because we know how hard you work as public servants and in your day jobs. And thank you very much to the audience for coming tonight.